Chokeholds, big controversy last couple of weeks. I've been dealing with this for 20-something years. I'm going to go over this. I'm going to show you, what it was about the chokehold, especially in the subway incident where you had the chokehold applied for 15 minutes and why there are issues with it. And there's all sorts of finger pointing going around and all sorts of things. But what I want to do is just show the video, make some salient points, and just, again, you'll end up deciding. But it's just, I think a lot of times when it comes to these types of things, when people talk about violence of any shape and sort, they leave out one critical thing. And I'm going to make sure that you know that. Before we do that, if you are ready for you and your family to start putting together a plan that will protect you and minimize the chance of violence coming in your life, please go to timlarkin.com. Give us your email and we will send you a free guide with 11 modules that will start putting together a plan to make sure that you live the best life you can and minimize the chance of violence coming in your life. The big one that came out was out of New York in the subway, and they had this guy as a street performer on there. He was harassing people, got to the point to where Daniel Penny thought that it was getting out of control and he was threatening passengers and he took action. I'm going to go ahead and play a news clip that I kind of liked. I'll stop it in between, make some points. But I think overall, they did a pretty good job. Overall.
He was a talented Michael Jackson impersonator performing on the New York subway and in Times Square.
Everybody clap their hands, everybody!
Now Jordan Neely's tragic death in a chokehold on the same subway where he once entertained passengers is causing an uproar.
Justice for Jordan Neely! Justice!
Okay, so far it's set up sounds like somebody got annoyed because he was being a street performer and he was doing Michael Jackson and just said, screw it, I'm just going to choke this guy out. This innocent guy. Goes on, they actually give his background later on. But again, this is how it's kind of been portrayed in the news. Any of you that have seen a lot of these threatening individuals, meaning just very aggressive, vocal, mentally handicapped people that they're just letting run wild right now, you understand just how weird it is to have something like this happen. I thought it was a little unfair the way the story started.
30-year-old Jordan Neely was not impersonating Michael Jackson when he boarded a subway train in Lower Manhattan. His life had apparently fallen apart. Witnesses say he was hostile and threw garbage at them. He reportedly screamed, "I don't have food, I don't have drink, I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison. I'm ready to die."
Where are the cops?
A passenger shot this cell phone video as a 24-year-old former U.S. Marine puts Neely in a chokehold and keeps him there. Two other passengers try to restrain Neely's arms. One witness shouts,
Just now look how it's applied, because I have pictures later of the training that this guy received. It's spot on. And notice he's not really responsive right now at this stage.
a dire warning. The chokehold reportedly went on for 15 minutes.
Okay, that passenger that said that was trying to warn him to let go of the chokehold, change to something else to restrain him. He recognized the length of the chokehold being applied to him.
Around 20 seconds, you lose consciousness, but then once you don't have prolonged oxygen supply to the brain, it's irreversibly damaged, and that's around 2 to 3 minutes.
The unidentified former U.S. Marine from Long Island was questioned by police but released. Now there are calls for him to be charged in Neely's death and angry protests. Firebrand New York Congresswoman AOC posted, "Jordan Neely was murdered, but because Jordan was houseless, the murderer gets protected." Mayor Eric Adams is calling her post irresponsible.
Let the investigation take its course.
John Miller, CNN's chief law enforcement analyst, says,
okay, before we get into this guy, like I said, some of that stuff's disingenuous. This report obviously is before Daniel Penny got arrested for this, the Marine, 23-year-old former Marine that did this. And then this guy's going to jump on and talk about the applicability of chokeholds, why people don't use them. The fact that this guy was military trained and that the military is using them. We'll talk about that.
Chokehold, banned by many police departments, is used by the Marines.
The blood flow is restricted to the brain, causing the enemy to pass out. This is something they're supposed to use on the battlefield, and they're trained in that. It's not supposed to kill somebody.
Neely had a record of 42 arrests, including 3 for assaulting women. He reportedly suffered from schizophrenia.
Now it's almost over, and then they get into this. So they're 2 minutes into it before they tell you the real background of this guy. Not that it justified him being, killed in any way, shape, or form, but we're not dealing with some innocent street performer here, and that's the problem. Is we're getting gaslit with a lot of this stuff, and it's really detrimental. This guy was, by all accounts, very threatening by most of the passengers, at that day. They're sitting there and they were, a guy that was arrested 42 times, and 3 of those assaults were against women. This is not somebody that is just some innocent street performer who's just down on his luck. This is somebody who's a viable threat.
His death is raising echoes of the murder of George Floyd in 2020 and the chokehold death of Eric Garner at the hands of New York City police in 2014. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is investigating, calling Neely's death a solemn and serious matter. Okay, so now that's the video that went out, everybody saw. I'm staying out of the politics of it and everything because, again, what I'm trying to, go over is when you put your hands on somebody, what does that mean? And what do you need to understand? Well, you need to understand what you're doing, first and foremost. So just to show a little bit of a graphic here. So when you have vascular neck restraint, what you're doing is you're cutting off, really the blood flow. The way to do this is making sure that, your elbow basically is where the trachea is, as you can see in the thing. You don't want to crush the trachea, and you really don't want to cut the airway off. That's not what's going on. What you want to do is you want to restrict blood flow, and you want the person to pass out. That's the goal of choking out somebody. You can see that, everybody keeps saying he's a former Marine and that, he was trained. And here's, the Marine Corps. This is them doing, I believe this is their McMaps program that they're doing, their Marine Corps martial arts program, and they're all learning how to choke out somebody. Where do I come down on this? I think people need to really focus on what you're doing when you're there. The problem is every time you put your hands on somebody, you have to be prepared for grievous bodily harm, whether intended or not. If I had to guess, I would imagine that Daniel Penny was, he threw his chokehold. That's what he felt comfortable with, and he did not want to let go of this guy. He applied it for 15 minutes, and that just does substantial damage. That you're cutting off your blood flow on somebody for that long a period is desperate. I mean, people are going to, you're going to end up killing somebody. Now, do I think he was trying to kill him? No, I think he was scared to death, actually. And I think they were just, didn't want to let go because he was afraid the guy would pop right back up, which is not what happens with this. Years ago, I was given some text from a court case, and what was really interesting when I was trying to tell people about chokeholds, what this doctor had to say in the court case was really interesting. I'm just going to put it up there. Dr. Rogers further testified a person can die of asphyxiation from a chokehold minutes after being released. That's after being released. And during this period, makes noises such as wheezing, gasping, or snoring. I've heard that before. I've seen it in training. Guys end up, getting choked out and they're snoring. Moreover, the duration of the chokehold resulting in death can be just a few seconds or it can be upwards to minutes. Now, that's the part I'm interested in. What is that saying? That's saying everybody responds to trauma differently. You don't know. Do you got the guy that can go for a couple minutes and be okay? Or do you get the guy that after a couple of seconds, you're going to get him. You're going to asphyxiate him. That's the dicey part of this. And this is one of many cases that were put out years ago. They were talking about the dangers of the chokehold. Now, it's just as dangerous to put your hands on somebody. As I told you, pushing somebody, they can fall over and, hit their head. All sorts of things. Every time we put our hands on another human being that we know nothing about, we know nothing about their genetic makeup, we don't know how resistant they are to certain things, it's a crapshoot. Now, applying this for 15 minutes, that's a long time. That's a long time. And unfortunately, the court system that young man is in is probably going to be able to prosecute him in some way, shape, or form, or they're going to at least try.
Politics aside, and please, in the comments, we all know you want to do that, do it on another site where you can talk about the politics of it all. That's not what I'm interested in. What I'm trying to get through to people here is chokeholds have been put across, especially in the BJJ community, for years as really safe, really safe. You can control a guy and he gets right back up, and I just think that's irresponsible. I'm not saying everybody's like that. There's some very good practitioners that know that, but the medical realities of putting somebody into a chokehold is highly risky. And I'm talking even in competition. It is not good for you to cut the blood flow off to the brain. It can do tremendous damage. And in this situation, this was the only thing this guy had in his quiver. And again, he applied it. He kept applying it for 15 minutes on there and not realizing that, hey, for 15 minutes, I have interrupted this guy's blood flow to his brain. I am shutting down the central nervous system. I am killing him, whether I want to or not. But what I thought was so interesting on the doctors thing, and this is what I've talked to many, many other doctors about, is this idea of, it can be just a few seconds or it can be upwards of minutes. And that's it. It's the duration. The duration is not, it's not like, oh, okay, 20, 40 seconds, I'm fine. No, it could be a few seconds and they could respond to it. It's how the body responds to trauma. So what's my point? My point is every time you put your hands on somebody, you have to be okay with the outcome. You have to be okay with the unintended outcome that you may grievously hurt this individual or kill them, and vice versa. It can be done to you. That's this thing. This is why I keep talking about the 3-day rule. This is why I keep talking about, what are the stakes? Is it worth it for you to get involved? I'm sure that Mr. Penny, probably if he had a chance to rethink this one, I don't think in a million years he thought he'd be in trouble for what he did, that he was trying to protect everybody. And I absolutely agree that that was his intention. But I believe now, if he knows what he does now, he probably would have decided not to take action and go on there. There's so many other ways you can restrain people. I work a lot with the mental health nurses that have to, deal with mentally, challenged people that are extremely strong, and how do you control them without hurting them, to the best of your ability. And it's a challenging situation, and there are many different ways to do it. And we've come up with some great protocols, but we never went for a choke. And they couldn't because these guys are medicated, and that was one of the things they were really worried about was, any sort of a chokehold or a restriction of the blood to the brain. So anyways, guys, this is an unfortunate situation. I really feel for Daniel Penny in this. I think he had the best of intentions. A little disingenuous of how they posted this guy, originally like he's an innocent street performer. I'm sorry, 42 arrests, 3 assaults against women. That needs to be put into the mix, folks. Now, that is not me justifying it, but I'm pretty consistent across the board. When it's a criminal act and they're doing criminal things and they're being threatening, then if the government doesn't step in, if the police department doesn't handle this situation, if the security services don't handle this situation, you're going to have more incidents of vigilantism, and it's going to get really, really ugly. This is like New York back in the 70s now, and that's a sad thing. All right, now listen, if you want to avoid getting into situations like this, I would go to timlarkin.com, give us your email, get your free guide. Again, guys, everything I do is to help minimize the chance of violence and then also give you the best information should, unfortunately, you need to use the tool. I want to show you how to shut somebody down and shut those threats down immediately. But until next time, stay safe.